Hey folks, how's it going? How's it going? There's there's a whole one of you. Hello. Well, if you can hear me, if you can see me, could you please type in the chat that everything is working fine on our end, and we will get to the show. I'm not expecting a lot of people. It's a very quiet period right now. Folks are on holiday. There's not a whole load of recruitment that's happening at Amazon at the moment. So thank you, Daniel, for checking the quality of the sound for me. So um, I'm gonna get cracking with the show, folks. As many of you come in, that's all fine and good. I'm gonna be here until 7 p.m. If I need to be, as long as the questions are keep piling, and I'm going to make sure that we're going to ask as many questions as I can, as long as it falls within my expertise. So, um, folks, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Yevgeny. I'm the co-founder of Day One Careers, a business that Gigi, the one and only Amazon interview whiz, and myself, who originally created the Day One Careers brand, we merged our businesses together in 2022 after a client that worked with both of us told us that we need to meet because we were apparently, according to her, the most credible people in the Amazon interview prep industry, which was good to hear. And so we decided to merge our businesses together, put our forces together, and so we are here. We're working for you guys. So we're running these weekly shows where you can ask me and Gigi when she's around. She's not around this week because she is on holiday, and well-deserved holiday. I'm not on holiday this summer because my kids are studying for their exams. But anyway, so ask me any questions that you have about behavioral interviews at Amazon, post them in the chat, and I will make sure to answer as many of them as I can. Now, a little bit of background about me, in case you guys don't know. So, like Gigi, I used to be a senior Amazonian. I was a marketing lead. I was a hiring manager. I was an interviewer. Actually, both Gigi and I, we like to remind everyone we, on top of interviewing and hiring people, and Gigi being a bar raiser, we also had proper jobs. We actually did something other than just hire and interview people. But Gigi and I both started these businesses individually. So Gigi started seeing during her interviewing, hiring, and bar raising experience, she started seeing that a lot of folks were joining interviews with very strange but similar patterns of doing strange stuff during interviews. And then when she was asking why they were doing what they were doing, they told her that they were watching YouTube and she realized that there's a lot of nonsense on YouTube. So she started the Amazon Interview Whiz channel while still at Amazon. So that was her project while she was still employed. And then after she left Amazon, she basically took over. She continued with the channel and started creating videos and courses and whatnot. My journey into this whole thing was slightly different. So I started noticing that many people with amazing profiles and CVs were not successful in Amazon interviews because they're just not skilled at either interviewing per se or at behavioral interviewing, which is the Amazon's non-technical interview format, or they just didn't invest time in preparing. So what I started doing is, rather than rejecting someone at the first phone screen, I would give them some coaching at the end of the interview, and then I would progress them to the second phone screen, and I would see and kind of wait what happens, and then lo and behold, for many candidates, actually, if you give them some coaching and they're willing to receive it and they're willing to act on it, their interview skills and outcomes improve. So that's how I got into this whole thing, and from 2022, we are hopefully your go-to source of information on all things behavioral interviews at Amazon. So the way this show will work, folks, is post all of your questions about your specific situations or anything that has to do with behavioral interviews at Amazon into the chat box. The chat box has a limit. I don't remember how many characters, but essentially, if you encounter a limit in the chat box, just split your question like you would like you would split a Twitter thread into parts and create a multi-part question, and we will make sure to answer it and locate all of the component parts. As long as your questions keep going, I keep going and keep answering. If the questions stop, we'll wrap the show, and then we'll see you hopefully next week. Now, some housekeeping about the types of questions that I will be happy to answer. So, if it's something incredibly generic, like I've got an interview next week, do you have any tips? Then I'm going to say, well, we've got hours and hours and hours of content in our YouTube channel that does just that, just foundational tips that you need to go through, and most likely your question will be answered there. On the other hand, if you ask me something functional, like, hey, I'm interviewing for a pre-construction manager, engineering manager next week, that is an actual job at Amazon. If you're into building fulfillment centers or data centers, then unfortunately I won't be able to answer it either, because I've never built data centers and I've never hired anyone who build data centers. But if it's anything that has to do with the behavioral component of your interviews, and it's going to be a massive component of your interviews, regardless of what role you're interviewing for, then I will be able to help. So with that in mind, let's get to your questions. So Daniel is currently a member of our community. So let us plot the question. So I've got cloud support experience and escalation manager interview, probably. How would you ensure to hit the right points for a TAM interview in the loop? Since my role consisted mostly of being reactive when TAM is highly valuable, being proactive, how I handled from a business level. Okay, fine. So I understand. You have cloud support experience in escalation manager. So that is your experience, but you're interviewing for a TAM role. And the TAM role, you need to be proactive. So how I handle from a business level, customer scaling, and so on. So there's Daniel, there's I guess there's two parts to the answer to this question. One is there's a reason why Amazon is looking for candidates that behave like Amazon wants them to behave. And the way that Amazon wants them to behave consistently in the workplace is what they have captured in their leadership principles. In the HR speak, these are the core competencies of the business. And Amazon is one of the few businesses that is very particular about the type of candidates that they're looking for. And that's why they're asking you for lots of stories, so that you can bring evidence to demonstrate that, yes, you are that candidate. And at the end of the day, if you strip away all the interview training that we can give you, at the bottom of this, you need to have the experience that matches what Amazon is looking for. You need to be able to pluck out situations where that demonstrate the behaviors that Amazon is looking for. Now, does that mean that you always need to be in a proactive mode everywhere? No, that does not mean that. Many times you will hear questions that will be asking for your steps and your behaviors in a context where you are probably reactive. For example, so deliver results as a leadership principle. One of the things that Amazon appreciates is that when you find yourself in very challenging and very unpredictable situations, where challenges are massive, when the challenges are unpredictable, that you can get on top of things, that you can rise above the circumstances, right? And Andy Jassy talks quite a lot about it when he talks about deliver results. So that's one of those things that Amazon expects you to do. Now, when they ask you to bring up a situation like that, does that mean automatically that they're they're asking you for something that was proactive? Well, yes and no. The actual situation that triggered you having to do something special to get on top of unpredicted major obstacles, that was an external factor. So arguably, a very decent story that demonstrates these behaviors is a story when you were in a reactive mode. The question is not were you in the reactive mode or in the proactive mode. The question is, did you get on top of the massive unexpected challenges? And how did you go about it? So I wouldn't be concerned with the fact that your role was, as you say, mostly reactive and Amazon needing something proactive. There are some questions where they do need something that's completely proactive, like that you were going outside of your duties to customers, um, outside of your roles and responsibilities. Like for example, ownership. If you think about the essence of the ownership leadership principle, is that, to be honest, if you treat your business that you work with as an owner, you don't need to wait to be asked to do something. If something needs doing, you just take the initiative and you go and do it, whether it's part of your role or it's not part of your role. So yes, in some cases, this calls for proactive stories, and there's nothing that I can tell you that will give you the techniques to kind of go around it by taking 100% of reactive work experience and just cleverly kind of massage it to be a proactive one. That's just not how it's going to work. And that's why what I'm saying to you is that at the core you need to have the experience that Amazon is looking for. But it doesn't need to be always proactive, if that makes any sense. And the rest we can definitely help you with in terms of making sure that you present your experience in the best possible way, and you don't and most importantly, you don't shortchange yourself by thinking, well, Amazon expects me to behave like Steve Jobs um, every day at work and only work on super crazy challenges and solve complex problems and that sort of thing. So I hope that that was helpful. Right, let's keep going. So here we have Angela. Many follow-up questions and no follow-up questions is based on the style of interviewer. I did the panel for managerial position. Let's see if there's anything else from Angelo there. No. Okay, so Angela, my interpretation of your question is the number of follow-up questions or the presence or absence of follow-up questions, is that something that is based on the style of interviewer? Yes and no. Uh, the the number of follow-up questions probably does depend on the style of the interviewer, but whether or not to ask follow-up questions, that is something that's typically depends on whether the interviewer believes that you gave them the evidence that they're looking for, or and whether they understand um, how you went about solving the problems that you were solving in your particular story or not. I would say this: I've never encountered an interviewer who wasn't asking any follow up questions whatsoever. I Some of our candidates reported that some of their interviewers didn't do that. So it's possible that you're going to get an interviewer who will just not ask any follow up questions. Um, in my experience, it is incredibly rare. In most cases, you will get plenty of follow up questions. Now, how many of them you will get and where, mostly where the interviewer will go with those questions, that is more of a style dependent than anything. Okay, let's keep going. I've got experience as a maintenance technician, and I'm having a loop interview tomorrow as a rack power technician. What leadership principle is vital on this role? I have no idea. Sorry. But I can point you in the direction of how you can figure this out. So, when a hiring manager posts a role externally, they're meant to have had a thought about what leadership principles are important for this role. And It is down to the hiring manager to define those leadership principles, and as for the loop, it's down to the hiring manager and the bar raiser to agree on what those leadership principles will be and to distribute them across the interviewing panel. So in most cases, if the hiring manager did a decent job writing up the job description, then the leadership principles that are important for that particular job, you will see some keywords in the job description that will give you some clues about what LPs are important. Now, in our YouTube channel, there are 2 videos where Gigi just takes an actual job description and chops it down into component parts and tries to identify the leadership principles that are likely important for this role. Just use that video. I think we've got 2 videos. Use those 2 videos. Follow the principles that GG is following in those videos, and that will get you to the closest possible way, to the closest possible place that we can possibly take you one day before your loop. So good luck. I hope this helps. Right. Here's a question from Sai. When we are putting a story together, how many minutes does it needs to be as a candidate in interviewing for SDE2? Okay, so my understanding is that SDE2 is an L5 role, and for an SDE2 for an L5, I would imagine that anything around 5 minutes is fine. Now, the official guidance from Amazon is that anything over 4 minutes is a bit too long. As far as we gather from what they've recently posted online, our guidance is kind of goes slightly against Amazon's, well, because again, it's not Amazon's job to help you guys as candidates. It's our job to do that, and we always recommend that you err on the side of adding more details as opposed to fewer details, because you never know what sort of interviewer you will get. You might get an interviewer that is excellent at their job as an interviewer, and they will tease out all the details that they need from you, even if your opening story was short. But it is also possible you might get someone who is not a great interviewer, and in this case, you're going to be put at a disadvantage. So 5 minutes for an SDE2, it is thereabouts a good length of a story. Okay, let's keep going. My L6 interview feedback was, you don't sound like an like an L6. Oh my god. Okay. Please shed a light on this. So this is a bad feedback. So this is incredibly un-Amazonian, and if your interviewer is watching this, naughty, very, very naughty. So now, first things first, let's be honest about something. Amazon's official policy is that they don't share feedback with candidates. So in most cases, now if you do get this feedback, and this feedback was given to you officially by the recruiter, it's a terrible bit of feedback and incredibly un-Amazonian. I'm not saying that this doesn't happen, right? But this is more of a water cooler type conversation that you might, like, I might have heard, I would have heard many times at inside Amazon, because humans are humans and people discuss candidates in various different ways. But then when it comes to following the actual process, even when someone says, let's say in the debrief, and if the bar raiser is worth their salt and the bar raiser is doing their job, if someone shows up in the debrief and says, well, this candidate doesn't sound like an L6, the bar raiser will have to descend on that comment and say, well, what exactly do you mean? Because at the end of the day, a comment like you don't sound like an L6, that's an incredibly subjective and incredibly unhelpful comment. And that's why I'm saying it's a terrible piece of feedback and incredibly un-Amazonian. Because it doesn't really get down to the facts, and there is no evidence. What does it mean you don't sound like an L6? Now, there could be a proper way to share a feedback that, based on the evidence that you shared during an interview, um, we've come to the conclusion that the experience and the examples that you have shared were not bar raising at an L6. But that has nothing to do whether you sound like an L6 or you don't sound like an L6. It has to do with the actual experience. And this is where indeed you have a collection of feedback from multiple interviewers, um, which is in itself individually subjective, but together, through the voting system and the debrief, it becomes less and less subjective. But it still needs to be grounded in facts. And just a feedback that you don't sound like an L6, that's a terrible piece of feedback. It should have never been given to you. So, I don't work for Amazon. I don't represent them. I don't know what else to say. But it's, I will apologize on their behalf. I'm sorry, even though I don't work there. But yeah, it's not really good. I would say, if you need to, you should follow up, and if you can follow up and just ask them, what exactly do you mean I don't sound like an L6? But um, very likely it would mean something along the lines of, you did not share examples that were bar raising at an L6. But that's my assumptions, and in reality, it could be 55 million other things. And obviously, I'm commenting on what you've shared with me. You don't sound like an L6, if that was the real feedback that was shared with you. Okay, let's keep going. I have an interview with a hiring manager on the senior brand role. Okay, cool. And there's nothing there. And then there's more details. My answers were long and too detailed, heavy. Yeah. Again, it's not a this feedback doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't tell us anything. Typically, in fact, what tends to happen is, when you interview for roles that are more senior, your examples become longer because, again, typically, as a candidate, you would be more senior. And what happens with seniority, as all of us progress through careers, we tend to solve problems that are more complex. We tend to work on problems that are bigger in size, scope, and impact. And that's why your stories become longer, because you just physically need more time to explain the situation. It doesn't mean that your stories need to become complex themselves, but you do need more time to kind of lay out what happened. It's a typical thing. If you've ever interviewed junior folks like L4s and L5s, given the careers that most of the applicants have at those levels, there's just not a huge amount of detail that you can divulge when describing a particular situation. Now, obviously, the details that you share, they need to be meaningful and they need to be relevant. If you're sharing details that are not relevant to the question that's being asked, in other words, if you created a detailed story that just simply did not answer the question that you were asked, then that is a completely different story. But even then, the feedback should not be, you don't sound like an L6. The feedback should be either, you don't have we couldn't find any bar raising examples amongst the evidence that you've shared, or if they have a problem with your communication skills. That's what they should have said. That functionally this role requires eloquent communication skills, because you're going to be seeing stakeholders at senior levels, blah 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 blah, and you don't have those. Again, I'm completely shooting in the dark here, right? It doesn't really tell me anything, but and I'm not sure if I helped you, but at least I empathized with it. Okay. I was wondering if I really botched my role play situation with my hiring manager, but I managed to answer behavioral questions during my other interviews. What are my chances of getting an offer? I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say because, at the end of the day, it's down to an individual hiring team to figure out what your chances are. depending on how much weight they're assigning to the role play versus the behavioral interview questions. Now, when you say you botched your role play situation, that's obviously your personal reflection of what happened. And when you say that you managed to answer the behavioral questions during your other interviews, managed to answer doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that you provided bar raising examples during those interviews. So as you can imagine, these are your reflections, self-reflections on how you think you did. How Amazon will be interpreting, specifically not just Amazon, Amazonian interviewers, of which there were many, how they are going to be interpreting your performance during your behavioral interviews and during your role play, that's entirely up to them. And it can match your self-reflections, or it could be completely different. So it's very difficult to give you a chance breakdown. But at the end of the day, if let's say if your self-reflections are correct and you did not do well during the role play, but you did well and you shared bar raising examples during your behavioral interviews, then even then it's down to the hiring team, specifically the hiring manager and the bar raiser, to figure out whether what's the weight of these two. So it's hard to know, but I hope it works out for you. More from Daniel. I follow Gigi's tips and created Tell Me About Yourself and brought me through your CV answer. Should I use that to answer why Amazon, or just one ready for that as well? A loop level. Right. Why Amazon is a different question. So why Amazon has to do with your motivation, and that's why it needs a different answer. Because your Tell Me About Yourself and Run Me Through Your CV, these are the interest that interviewers have when they ask these questions. It mostly has to do with, can you do the job? That's basically it. They want to hear it from you. How has the experience that you've had today prepared you to do an excellent job in the role that you're interviewing for? They're also interested in understanding whether you will do the job, or will you run away in 3 months, 6 months, whether you run away internally or externally. Both are possible. So you need a separate response. Now, when you these are all very important during phone screens, but once you get into the loop, these are not counted towards the hire, no hire, or being inclined to hire, not inclined to hire, because that's it. It all has to be just based on your answers to the behavioral interview questions. But during phone screens, they do count. This is not to say that during the loop no one will ever ask you questions like, tell me about yourself, or why do you want to work here? But if these questions are asked during the loop, these are more warm-ups than anything else. There's a follow-up from Akanksha. Is there a favored bar raising LP? There is no such thing as a bar raising LP. LPs are just LPs. The idea that there is a bar raising LP, it's nothing that I've ever heard or experienced. There are bar raising examples or not. Bar raising examples have to demonstrate that you behave in line with Amazon's leadership principles, and that the work that you've done, your expertise, places your experience as better than at least 50% of Amazonians doing the same jobs on the same level. That's the idea. So, right, folks. Doesn't look like we've got any more questions coming into the chat box. Most of you are lurking around and not asking anything. So let's let's wait for some more questions, because if there are no more questions, then I can tell you guys about some of the amazing freebies that we have, and then I can let you go. So let me start talking about what else you can get from day one careers, what you should get. And then if something comes to your mind, just ask some more questions. So let me change the banner here. All right, folks. So this is the this is the place to go, right? www.day1.career/free stuff. So go to that URL to get free stuff. Now, what free stuff are you going to get from Day One Careers? So first thing you're going to get is you're going to get access to our free community with loads of candidates who are interviewing with Amazon. You can get into the interview buddies channel, and you can schedule up link ups with other Amazon candidates and interview each other. Interview practice is incredibly important. Whether you practice with us as coaches or whether you practice just with other candidates, both are very valuable. So don't snub this opportunity. The second thing you're going to get is, in the same community, we actually have a chatbot that answers your questions. And that chatbot is trained on the entire library of our YouTube channel. And we give it to you for free. So you can use that chatbot, and the chatbot's name is Andy. God knows why. But that chatbot will, if we've spoken about it anywhere in a YouTube channel, that chatbot will know the answer. So I think it's an invaluable tool, and we're just giving it to you guys for free. So use it to your advantage to prepare for your interviews. And then the third thing that we're gonna give you is a free course on customer obsession. So customer obsession is, I think, the most popular leadership principle when it comes to interviews. It's absolutely everywhere. And so if you come here, we're going to give you a full course from start to finish on how to answer questions on customer obsession. We'll tell you exactly what behaviors they're looking for. We'll give you some examples on how to answer. We're going to tell you what are those kind of behavioral themes that they're looking for. So literally, you're going to come out in the other end being able to then go into your memory and find those amazing examples and shape them properly and be able to answer questions on customer obsession. And then the last thing that you're going to get in this freebie is Amazon Interview Tool Pack. It's basically a massive PDF document where we invented what we call plausible Amazon interview questions. Now, Amazon does have something that's called Amazon Interview Question Bank. We don't have access to it because we don't work at Amazon. And even if we did have access to it, we wouldn't be able to share it with you because that document is confidential. But we've worked at Amazon long enough. We've interviewed and coached hundreds of people. So we can just invent questions on the fly that map to a leadership principle. And that's exactly what we've done. So get the Amazon Interview Tool Pack from here and use questions located in that tool pack, which are all grouped by leadership principle to interview each other and practice this way. Now, let me get back to the chat box to see if we've got anything else. I want to know more what I should be preparing for senior brand role at Amazon DSP. Well, the only thing I can tell you is there's any interview process at Amazon will contain the functional element and the leadership element, right? Doesn't matter what role you're interviewing for. So a senior brand role at Amazon DSP will have the leadership principles component, and then the hiring manager and the hiring team will have to think about, okay, functionally, what do we need from this candidate? So the interview format that you're going to have, it's something that you can ask your recruiter to tell you. Like, for example, how many behavioral rounds are you going to get? How will your functional skills be assessed? And that's the kind of information that they should be able to tell you. Like, is there going to be any functional exercises or assessments? Otherwise, your functional skills typically in non-technical roles, which is what you are, they typically kind of come through as you answer behavioral interview questions. Now, the other question is, okay, what leadership principles should you be preparing for? So look at the job description and try and find keywords for leadership principles that were baked into that job description. We have 2 videos in our channel where we show how to do it. If you can't do it, and GG can do it for you for a fee, there's a service that you can book. You can book on our website. So this way, you can figure out what leadership principles are important, so you can prepare stories that map to those leadership principles, and you can ask your recruiter about any specific functional assessments that they will ask you to do. From what I've seen, if it's a senior brand role, it's a classic non-technical role. It's quite improbable, unlikely that you're going to get any specific functional assessments. But during the phone screens, that they can ask you to walk them through your resume and talk about projects that you've had. So that's that. Let's keep going. So what are the biggest red flags during loop interviews? I don't have any specific red flags. I've never had any specific red flags. It's a very tedious process where you either share stories that that give me as an interviewer an idea that your experience is better than those of 50% of other like L6s, 5s, whatever, doing the same role that I know, or it's not. It's very unlikely when anyone that I've ever interviewed that they bombed an interview because there were red flags. It's just that they couldn't make the grade. But the reason why they couldn't make the grade for those who were unsuccessful, they were for all sorts of different reasons. There are some red flags that I know that, again, if you speak with Gigi, who did a lot more interviewing as a bar raiser, that she'll tell you that, the red flags would have been that the candidate is making stuff up. And usually, if you're an experienced interviewer, you can tell. You can tell that the candidate is making stuff up, or that the candidate is just behaving in some strange way. Like, for example, they've had a whole bunch of stuff pre-prepared, and when, as an interviewer, I start kind of going on my script because I have got specific leadership principles to interview the candidate on, then the candidate shares stories that are just completely random. How many times have these happened? Like with me, I've never had a single candidate lying to me in an interview. Just never happened. I've had candidates who were massively unprepared and who bombed the interviews because what they were sharing with me just wasn't bar raising. But it wasn't necessarily any specific red flag. It was just, another day at the job. Some candidates have great examples that are bar raising, some candidates don't. But otherwise, no red flags. Using themes to combine your stories: customer focus, failures, problem solving. Should we prepare 2 to 3 per theme and link them to each LP? If no, should we think differently about it? So you should prepare indeed 2 to 3 stories per leadership principle. In most cases, 2 stories per LP is something that you can easily get away with. So I wouldn't prepare 3 per LP. Start with 2, and if you end up with 2 per leadership principle, that's fine. And start with a leadership principle and go backwards. Failures, by the way, is not a leadership principle, and problem solving is not a leadership principle either. So always start with a leadership principle. Again, if you were using our paid courses, you would know exactly how we teach you to do it. So you understand what. Let me give you like the I guess the framework on how you should prepare, and it applies whether you own our paid courses or not. So even if you're kind of DIYing your own prep. So leadership principles are Amazon's core competencies. Every single question that they ask you is mapped to a leadership principle. There is no leadership principle that says failures. There's no leadership principle that says problem solving. Problem solving is just hygiene, something that is expected from all candidates who apply to Amazon. Like it's just it's a completely sort of hygiene factor, being able to solve a problem. Failures is it's a hearsay, it's a legend. Amazon likes to talk about failures. No, there are some questions under some leadership principles that ask you to share situations that sound like failures. Like, for example, I write a lot sometimes under the leadership principle. I write a lot. Sometimes they would ask you a question about when um, a decision didn't pan out the way that you wanted. Right now, if you look at the definition of the leadership principle, is that the leaders are right a lot, but then um, they always um, they always look for to disconfirm their beliefs, and they're aware when anecdotes and data differ. What that means is that um, leaders learn from making bad decisions. So essentially, from making one bad decision, you should be able to learn quickly and make like 10 good decisions as a result of that. So that's why sometimes you might get a question that says, "Hey, tell me about a time when a decision didn't pan out the way that you wanted to," or something similar. But that's not a failure question. In itself, there are no failure questions, right? So you start with the leadership principle. Always, you need to understand what behavioral themes the leadership principle is about. Get all the information that you want. Read Amazon's blog, read about Amazon, watch Andy Jassy's videos, use YouTube, whatever you want. Use our paid products where we literally hand hold you through all of this from start to finish. And then query your memory on, interesting, when was the time when I was really demonstrating this leadership principle, these behaviors and those behaviors? So that's how you should do it. Start with the leadership principle and work backwards. And then once you've identified those situations, you need to convert them into stories, effective stories from start to finish with all the right sections, with all the results, all the data that Amazon wants. So that's how you do it. Start with the leadership principle, work backwards. Work backwards is a very Amazonian way to solve problems. Start with the end in mind. Starting with the end in mind, I think Stephen Covey pioneered this, not Amazon. But anyway, that's for a different coaching session. Let's keep going. So something from Sai. Sai, did you ask something before? Yes. Earn trust, have backbone, screen, commit. Okay, so we have a lot of leadership principles, but no questions. So I'm not sure what to do with this, Sai. Maybe follow up with a clarification. Is there something more I should share? I think this is a follow-up to this. I want to know more what you're preparing for senior brand role at Amazon. No, I think everything that I've mentioned, that's pretty much it. Let's keep going. Is a 7-minute story good or bad for an L6 interviews? It's a bit too long. I would say up to 6 minutes. For a 7-minute story is thereabouts for an L7 and upwards. I think for an L6 it's a bit too long. Let's keep going. What is the cooldown period for applying to Amazon's new grad position after completing the loop interview? They should advise you. I wouldn't know. And the reason why I'm saying this is because we're getting conflicting information and conflicting reports from candidates in terms of what cool down periods or cooling off period rather are being applied after folks bomb their loops. At some point in time, we've received information that it's meant to be 24 months, but then we're getting candidates that are telling us that they were advised that there's a 6-month cooldown period or cooling off period rather. Just ask your recruiter. That is the best source of information. And by the way, nothing's stopping you from applying. Even if you are inside a cooling off period, there's nothing that's stopping you from applying. You will just get automatic rejections. And the fact that you've applied, it doesn't extend your cooling off period. So nothing's stopping you from actually testing it that way. Is there any particular in-depth format to draft bar raising stories? Not really. You just need to have bar raising experiences. Yeah. Don't invent stories. That's not just for you, Sai. That's for anyone. Don't invent stories. There's no way to draft a bar raising story. There is a way, however, there's a way, and I'll tell you this, Sai. There is a way to make sure that you don't avoid any specific seniority signals. Like, you need to be able to talk about your experiences in a way that make sure you don't skip on signaling your seniority within the organization that you worked in. That definitely exists. And we list all those seniority signals in the Amazon Interview Success System, which is our flagship paid product. Let's keep going. What all I should prepare for business analyst roles in Amazon phone screening. So for anything that has to do with anything functional, anything that has to do with data analytics, ask Amazon because they will know. We don't know because we're not functional experts on any specific functional area of the role. On the non-technical and behavioral side, prepare answers to tell me about yourself. Why do you want to work at Amazon? Walk me through your resume, and then try to identify what leadership principles are important for that role by either asking your recruiter. They may divulge this information. They may not. It really depends. Or just look at the job description and try to decipher what LPs are important to them and prepare stories that map to those leadership principles. That's basically what I would recommend. Some of my stories are overlapping with each other. I guess we cannot repeat our examples, right? So your specific stories, as in specific examples, you should not repeat. But if they overlap, for example, if the kind of big project is the same, but the individual stories that you're sharing are from different situations that happened while you were going through a long project, then that's fine. Generally speaking, you can squeeze out multiple stories from one situation because situation is reality, and reality is a lot more complex, right? Because you don't really wake up one day and you think, oh, today is going to be a customer obsession day, so I'm just going to behave only in line with what Amazon expects under customer obsession, and I'm not going to demonstrate any other leadership principles whatsoever. Forget earn trust. Who cares about frugality? That doesn't work this way. You come to work and you just you solve problems, and as you do that, you demonstrate various different leadership principles. So in one big situation, you can squeeze out multiple stories. Stories need to be focused on leadership principles, and these should not overlap. But the overall context, like the bigger situation, that can overlap. All right, let's keep going. How can you recognize that the loop went well? You can't, unfortunately. Amazonians Amazonians are known to be trying not to give you too much about the outcome of the loop, and that makes sense because they don't want to lead you on. And the reason why that is the case is because the outcome is decided in a debrief, not in any individual interview. And so, if you put yourself in the same shoes, if you telegraph too much to the candidate after an individual interview, but then you end up not hiring them, that's going to create a very awkward situation. So unfortunately, there is no way to know. Ask them. Ask your recruiter for feedback. You can ask. In most cases, like 99% of cases, they're not going to tell you anything until a decision's been made. But yeah, there's no way to tell. Assume it's always 50-50 until you get that decision. Do not read into their poker faces or polite faces or whatever, because some people are just polite and they will smile and nod, and you think, oh, that felt that felt nice. I thought I did well. I've got some positive feedback, right? Because when someone is smiling or nodding when you're being interviewed, then you interpret that sign as that must be going well. Yeah, don't do it. Literally just wait until the decision, and until decision, it's always 50-50. How long should be the optimal length of the story? Roughly as many minutes as the level of the role that you're applying for. That's basically the overall guidance. If you are applying for L7 upwards, it's about 7 minutes, and just don't make it longer than 7 minutes. That's about it. All right, folks, but for those of you who just joined, until we hear some more questions, I'm just going to put this again on I'm gonna put this again here. So day one careers slash free stuff. Go get some free stuff. We've got a free course on customer obsession. We've got access to our free community with an chatbot trained on the whole content of this channel, and a channel inside our community where you can link up with others to interview each other and practice interviewing. There's a whole bunch of free stuff that we're giving away. Just go and grab all of it. And let me read some more questions. Any experience in dealing with interviews relating to the Amazon Freight Partnership Program? Absolutely not. Sorry, can't give you any tips because we don't have any experience with any particular job family. There are thousands of job families at Amazon, thousands. So sorry about that. Is there any time limit in answering questions? Well, I mean, yes and no. There's no set time limit. I mean, there's a time limit for individual interviews because that's basically what it is. And the individual interviews are what they are, right? So it's up to an hour. Within that, everything has to fit. So there is no time limit. And he's a shout from Daniel that the community and the content that we're posting has been lovely. Thank you lots. You are most welcome. We're trying really hard. Another one from Mohit. Does having a longer story impacts the outcome negatively? No. It's literally your story is an opener in an interview. That's what it is. It's like your opening, the opening part. And then the rest of the interview is follow-ups and drill downs and how you answer follow-ups and drill downs. With some interviewers, they will allow you to just go through your entire opening story, and then they will ask you follow-ups and drill downs. And some interviewers will not allow you to do that. They will immediately start jumping in on anything that they find curious. So now, what tends to happen, and the reason why we're saying to everyone, the length of your story needs to be roughly the same as the level number that you're applying for, is because most candidates tend to err on the side of shorter stories. So the other way, Mohit, right? Not longer stories, but shorter stories, and that becomes problematic. Why? Because at the end of the day, for your interviewer to conclude that that they want to hire you, so they want to vote as inclined to hire, you need to have shared enough evidence that suggests that you have bar-raising career experiences, meaning better than 50% of Amazonians doing the same role at the same level, and you behave like an Amazonian in line with the leadership principle that you're being interviewed. That needs time. You can't do this in 2 minutes. Now, a good interviewer will be able to tease all these details, get them out of you through follow-ups and drill downs, even if you open with a 2-minute story. But there will also be interviewers who will not do that. They will just take your 2-minute story, conclude that you haven't shared any evidence that's bar raising, and that's it. And they will move on, and you will get a rejection. So we're always saying err on the side of more detail. But how much more detail? Roughly, the length of your opening story should be roughly the same number of minutes as the level of the role that you're applying for. Well, there you go. How long should the story of a new graduate be? About 4 minutes, I would say. Thereabouts. How are the L6 product manager non-technical interviews different from an L6 program manager non-technical? From a behavioral standpoint, it's entirely down to the hiring manager. You probably will have 2 different hiring managers, one hiring an L6 program manager and the other one hiring a product manager non-technical. And they're going to conclude that due to unique circumstances and situations in their particular team and business, a different set of leadership principles is critical for this role versus that role. and that will shape the interview loop lineup and likely the selections that your interviewers for phone screens will make on what leadership principles they're going to interview you on. So it's the roles themselves in themselves, in terms of leadership principles, there's nothing in them specifically that will necessitate a difference or similarity. It's down to the hiring manager to figure out. In terms of any functional questions or exercises, again, it's down to the team that's hiring you. So it's very, very flexible. Let's imagine a scenario. At the debrief, 3 vote to hire and 2 not, or the opposite. What will happen in that situation? So during the debrief, the only 2 people that need to vote inclined to hire is the bar raiser and the hiring manager. At the end of the day, if these 2 vote as inclined to hire, an offer will be made. If the job's still available, that is, by the time. Now, what tends to happen during debriefs is, and the reason why that's what they call their debriefs, is people change their mind. If there was no debrief, as you can imagine, voting could just be done electronically, which is what happens. And then it's down to the hiring manager and the bar raiser, right? But everyone records their votes initially outside of the debrief. And then they go to the debrief. And then during the debrief, they debate and decide. And then it's all down to the hiring manager and the bar raiser. Both need to be inclined. Now, the only different situation is that, for example, if the hiring manager is inclined, but the bar raiser is not inclined, or if the bar raiser is inclined, but the hiring manager is not inclined. In these cases, there is no offer. So both the hiring manager and the bar raiser need to agree that the candidate needs to be brought in. And then we have this question from Shashank. For a BIE and interview, which one of the 5 interviews do we impress together? Bar raiser, HR? Yeah. Forget. So it's the wrong question. Whoa. I'm just messing my WhatsApp follower. It's the wrong question to ask, Shashank. You need to impress them all. The way that you do it is you take all of your experience that you've had to date, you chunk it down into situations, and then convert situations into stories that map to the leadership principles that they want to interview you on for this role. And then you make sure you come with your best, with the absolute best examples that you have, the ones that demonstrate you behaving like Amazon wants you to behave in these leadership principles, and you doing the best work of your career, something that you are genuinely proud of. This is, again, I'm just giving you the overall kind of cookie cutter rule. In our Amazon interview success system would go into detail exactly how to make sure that you don't overlook bar raising examples and that you take off all the seniority signals. But in this session, just to give you something very simple, it needs to feel something special, right? You need to be proud of every single example that you share. If you're not proud of it, if it's just meh, don't expect Amazon to hire you for meh. You need to be proud. Now, will it be enough for Amazon or not? No one knows. But at least you need to feel comfortable that you have brought your best. And every example that you share with Amazon needs to give you that feeling. Why is that important? Because all of these people, the bar raiser, HR is not going to interview you. I mean, the recruiter is not HR. So recruiters will interview you during recruiter screens. And once you get to the loop, then it's just a business, right? And to impress the business, all of your interviewers, you need to bring the best. And it is important because then there is the debrief where everyone discusses the evidence that you've shared, and everyone, including the bar raiser and including the hiring manager, can change their mind. They can change their mind to hire you or not to hire you. So that's why we always say aim for a consistent level of performance and consistent strength of examples. Right. I think this is it, folks. Let me just repeat where you should go. Go get this stuff. Go get our freebies. Join our free community. Link up with other candidates. Use the interview buddies channel to interview each other. Get the Amazon interview tool pack, which you can get from this URL, and get the questions to use while you are interviewing each other with the candidates that you link up. And then get the taste the course on customer obsession and learn how to answer questions on customer obsession. So if we don't see you in our community, and I hope that we can see you all in our community, it's completely free. Just go and join. Then we'll see you next week. All right, folks. Good luck with your interviews. And yeah, just get into the community and hope to see you all there. Take care, folks.